Biomechanics. So when you think of biomechanics, it's a big word, but think of breaking this down into two words. So you have bio, um, which means living. So from the word bio, you get the word biology, the study of living things, and mechanics. So how machines move or how something moves. Um, when you think of mechanics as well, you think about forces, you think about physics. What is biomechanics? So biomechanics simply is anatomy plus physics. Biomechanics is the study of how force affects biological systems. Biomechanics considers the effects of force in the context of anatomical position, placement, and posture. So, for example, you have biomechanists who study a plant or plants, and they're studying how whether these plants are growing this direction or that direction in relationship to the wind in that area. Okay, so you have um, the biological system there, which is the plant, and then the force, which is the wind. So you have some biomechanists who do that. You have biomechanists popularly these days who work with golfers. So if you think about it, this sport is so special because it's that moment of the swing. I don't know much about golf, but it's that moment of the swing that is so important, right? So the biomechanist in this context is studying how fast you're twisting, um, what is the range of motion, and taking into account all of these factors that affects the swing, and how does this affect the sport, how does this affect the person doing the sport, the sportsman, how does this affect the body. Okay, so that's biomechanics simply put. um, so we're studying here, what we're doing is we're studying sort of the big picture of biomechanics. We're giving you a little introduction about that, and slowly we're going to build in yoga into this. So how sorry, I don't know where to place this myself. There we go. And slowly we'll bring in the concepts of yoga and how these two things can join together. Understanding the adaptations the body undergoes with exercise and training. Okay, so your body is your body, you are a living organism. Um, and Yes, you are a machine, but you are also a living machine. So there's so many things involved. Your body, as we saw in the muscular system and the skeletal system lecture, your body is always changing and adapting to what you are asking of it to do. So when you are challenging your muscles and you are exerting effort and putting load force on the muscles, then the muscles adapt. You when you create micro tears in the muscles, you the muscle fibers build back up even stronger. So you start to see muscle tone, you start to see the form of the body. This is also happening in the bones. When the bones are compressed, when there are forces that compress the bone, whether that's against gravity, against an external object, or just bone against bone, such as when you twist. The if there's enough stimulation for the bones, then this stimulates for this is a stimulus for bone growth. Um, the bone puts more layers to adapt to what you are doing to the action that you're putting on the bone. So please review Wolff's Law and David's Law. That will really help you a lot in your understanding of, those are the key points in understanding biomechanics, skeletal system, and muscular system for yoga. Okay, structure. So what are the things? We're looking at the things that the body undergoes when we're training, exercising, doing yoga. So we think about structure. We think about the anatomical differences between individuals. So you can be doing the same pose, let's say warrior two. With warrior two, you need very open hips, but the range of motion of the hips, of the femur bone in one individual, from individual to individual, will be different. So how we feel during the warrior two will be different from person to person, depending on hip structure. It's also depending on the other structures of the body, but for now we're just taking the hips as an example. So for maybe somebody with very open hips, this will be very easy. They will feel at ease with the pose. Somebody with tighter hip structure might feel that this is a very challenging pose. Okay, you can, let's leave it at that. Let's go to the next one. Mechanical efficiency. So this is the ability of the body to move and to move well. Apply forces in the appropriate way. Muscles are firing in the right order at the right time to do the motion required to overcome the external resistance and produce positive adaptations. In other words, to not injure the body. Okay, so for example, we've learned that from person to person, we have differences in the muscles that are more dominant. So these dominant muscles are the muscles that you tend to use over and over again. And what happens is those muscles get stronger and stronger, and the weaker muscles, because you prefer not to use them. And remember, this is not happening on the conscious level. This is really happening very quickly, so almost automatic and subconscious. Unless you do a very, very mindful type of practice, if you really bring mindfulness and awareness into your movements, okay? Which is easily done with training. That's what we do yoga for. And also things like Tai Chi, Feldenkrais, which brings awareness into the movements. This will really help you think about which muscles are dominant in you, which muscles you are using, preferring to use more than others. And then what you want to do is you want to retrain the body so that you can get your muscles working. Well, you want to get your whole system to be working very, very efficiently. So all the muscles are working very, very in a very balanced way. Okay, so you can also take some tests with a physiotherapist. There are certain tests to determine which muscles are more dominant in a person, and muscles that are probably weaker. So there's a science to it as well. There's the example here would be also Lance Armstrong. So Lance Armstrong is a cyclist and also triathlete at a very, very high level. And he's most known for the Tour de France, so the cycling race. And he did very, very well in that. But before excelling in that sport, he was a triathlete. So in triathlon, you do swimming, running, and cycling. And he did the triathlon for many years. He competed in triathlon for many years, but he didn't have mechanical efficiency for the swimming and the running. In other words, his body mechanics, his body was not adapted to, or wasn't, the muscles weren't firing in the right order at the right time. It wasn't functioning as well for the discipline of running and swimming. Then when he went to cycling, to the Tour de France, and it's just cycling, um, his body was really, really mechanically efficient for that movement, and so he won, and he excelled in that sport. So the third one here is physiological efficiency. So how well does your body transport oxygen? How well do you use oxygen during exercise? So you think about VO2 max. In this case, the VO2 max tells us how well the person can transport oxygen during exercise. And your VO2 max, you measure this in a laboratory. And normally they fit a machine on you, and you go on the treadmill, and the machine can measure your VO2 max. Physiological efficiency as well. We talk about the correct type of muscle fibers working. So for example, there are muscle fibers that you use for explosive activities, and muscle fibers you use for endurance activities. So for example, skipping rope or jumping, think like certain like CrossFit movements or high intensity movements. You need certain type of muscle fibers for that. And then you also need but it's a different type of muscle fiber that, let's say, you use for like stretching and endurance, staying longer in an activity. So just think about the body type. For example, just think in your mind the body type of a sprinter versus a marathon runner, or in cycling, somebody who the body type of somebody who is a climber, climbing mountains, versus someone who is like a sprinter. Okay, it's they excel in each of those things because they have more of the muscle fiber that is adapted to that activity. So for explosive activities, you need more of the fast twitch muscles, and for endurance activities, you need more of the slow twitch muscles. And these muscle types of muscle fibers, we still have to study more about them, but you can only train them to a certain extent. But actually, you are born with a certain amount of fast twitch muscles and a certain amount of slow twitch muscles. Why are mechanical efficiency and physiological efficiency is important? Why are these two things important? Mechanical efficiency, so your body moving in the right way, and physiological efficiency, so you're using the resources like oxygen and ATP, the energy in the body, very, very well. Well, maybe the answer is obvious, maybe not. The more mechanically efficient and physiologically efficient a body can be, the less it is likely to be injured because you are moving well and you're adapting to the activity. Injuries to connective tissues, so injuries to tendon, ligaments, muscle, joint capsule, are due to improperly applied forces. How does this relate to yoga? When you ask a student or you ask yourself to go beyond what your body is adapted to, that's when injuries happen. So let's say you were inspired by all of these photos that you see on social media, and you want to try some of these poses, but you don't know your body really well, and you don't know the strength that each of your muscles have very well. And so you try a pose that requires a lot of strength. So for example, a handstand or a headstand, which requires a lot of strength through the shoulders and through the core muscles. Um, and what happens is you try the pose, and then your muscles are not adapted to this, and you don't have enough strength, so you crumble in the pose, and so you get injured. Or let's say you push yourself to the limit. Let's say you do lizard pose or pigeon pose, and you really really want to get down to the floor, so you push yourself, use straps, blocks, and you ask somebody, so you ask, this is important, so you ask somebody, come and help me, you adjust me in this pose, and they force you down, and then bam, okay, because you reach the limit of what your tendons, your muscles, your joints are adapted to, um, they break, so you get injured. Doesn't always happen, okay? Um, like we've been saying all along, your body, your connective tissue, your muscles, your ligaments, they adapt, right? Um, Soft tissue like muscle and tendons adapt more than ligament and bone, although bones also adapt. Um, so what would be a better scenario? So what would be a better scenario for our training? Um, Instead of forcing yourself into a pose, you can ease yourself into the pose, right? And instead of trying to attain this picture of the posture in your mind right now, you spend um, days or weeks or months, depending on how your body adapts to this, right? So you allow your body to adapt to the pose. You train slowly so that the body has time to adapt. And another thing is you also consider your limitations. You consider your limitations. So if you review our lecture on the bones, you'll know that we don't all have the same structure of joints. So some of us have more range of motion than others. That can be helped with training only to a certain extent. But after a while, your training can only take you so far if you don't actually have the bones for it. The the structure of your bones can stop you from progressing further. So be aware, because sometimes you see this on the internet and social media. You'll see, let's say, a post or a photo, and it says, 2000, year 2000, and they're showing, they're showing the person in trying to do a ustrasan, a camel pose, and only going this way. And then year 2000, and 3 years later there's another photo, and it's like a really deep back bend. And so be careful about things like that, because the message might be that, oh, okay, so everybody can do it, just given enough time. That's not true. Everybody can do it given enough time and training, if you have the bone structure for it. But like we said, people have different bone structures. So if you've already reached capacity of the full capacity of the joint, okay, the full range of motion of that joint. And the reason why you cannot go further into that back bend, into that split, into whatever pose it is that you want to do, the reason why you can't go further is because the bones are already touching, then that would be the limit. Okay, so I hope that was clear. You can review this again or ask me a question. Review also the lecture on bones or skeletal system. And I also recommend the DVD of Paul Grilly. I believe the DVD is called Anatomy for Yoga. In that DVD, he has live examples of his students, and he goes through that concept very, very, very well. Okay. Mechanical stress on the body is overcome with positive mechanical and physiological adaptations. Okay, so your body adapts to the stress that you are putting on it. So, for example, you're trying to lift an object. Let me get an object. Okay, so let's say you're trying to lift this object. And then you can't lift it because it's very heavy. So you get another object that is lighter. Okay, so let's say this is my lighter object, and I'm going to lift it up, let's say 5 times. And I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and it's really easy. So the next day or the following week, I can add some weight to this because I want to get my muscles stronger, and then I start pushing it and lifting it up. And I go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's very hard to lift it. Okay, but I progress in this way by adding more weight. So my muscles are learning, are adapting to it, okay? Or I adapt by increasing the repetition, for example. So instead of doing, so for example, let's say I do 5 today and 6 tomorrow. There's many different ways to increase the load or increase the frequency, and then slowly allowing the body to adapt to that. Okay, so in your yoga practice, okay, if let's say your goal is strength, if your goal is more endurance, okay, and more strength to train the body athletically, then, and it's not for rest and relaxation, so you're training your body. For example, if this is your goal, then what you should be doing is you're doing a yoga sequence. Once the yoga sequence starts to become very easy for you, then you either have to start to do it more often, so increase the frequency, or do it for longer, maybe hold the poses longer, or change up the poses so that they're more challenging. Because what happens is, think about it, why did this sequence become easy? So let's say the first time you do the sequence, it was really hard, you were sweating, you couldn't even finish it. And then by a few weeks, a few months, it's very easy for you. You don't even break a sweat. And it's the same sequence of poses. Why did that happen? Because your body adapted to it. You got fitter, right? Your body adapted to the mechanical stress that you're putting on it, which means you're getting stronger. So that's good. So if your goal is to keep doing this, then you have to keep adjusting as well the program. Okay. Understanding structure and function of joints. Okay. forces applied to joints improperly can lead to damage or injury. All right, so that's really important as well. Greater load than what the body can adapt to. So if you're forcing the joint to go where it is not adapted to go, then injuries can happen. The key word here is adaptation. What is my body, given the structure and the training, adapted for? Okay, you have to get away from like, oh, this pose, that pose, and that pose. Those poses are dangerous for everybody all the time. Okay, so you have to get away from that way of thinking. That it's sort of like a one-way thinking. You have to consider, okay, who is the person doing the posture? Um, uh, is it somebody who is trained, meaning has been doing yoga for a long time? How fit is this person? Okay, so does this, do they have the muscle strength? You know, which muscles are strong, which muscles are weak? You think about, okay, what is their range of motion like? What is their flexibility like? And in terms of that flexibility, is there more? Okay, just on the basis of their bone structure, is there more? Can they go further, or are they blocked by their bone structure and they can't go any further? You think about the pose itself. Okay, what joints am I asking to be moved in what direction, right? How much strength do I need, or is it balance that I need in this pose? And then you make a judgment. Okay, so for this person, that pose might be dangerous. For this person, that pose is just right. I feel like Goldilocks. For that person, um, that pose is super easy. So it really depends on all of these factors. And that's how you want to start to think. Okay, if you're thinking as a biomechanist, this is how you want to start to think as a yoga teacher, and not just have a list and say, okay, these poses are bad, no, all the time for everyone. um, One example of that, because as teachers sometimes we hear things over and over again and we just repeat them without really thinking too much about it. Like for example, there is a pose, um, the lunge. Let's take the lunge, the low lunge. So when you're doing the low lunge, we always say to our students, which is a very good thing, to have the knee in line with the toes. So the knee and the toes in line, and you don't go over. You don't go over that, and that's a very good thing, because you don't know beforehand. So you don't know while you are teaching because your eyes don't have an x-ray machine on it, so you don't know the structure of their patella, of their knee bone, and all of the ligaments around it. So for a lot of people with knee problems, if the knee goes over the toes, that could be a dangerous thing. But it's not for all people. So for some people, they have the structure, the flexibility, range of motion, so that if the knee actually goes over the toes, it's fine with them. So let's say also it has something to do with the ankle joint as well. So thinking as a biomechanist, or a budding biomechanist, or anatomist, with all the things that we know now, you have to start to think about all of the factors that come into play, okay, rather than just sticking to certain rules. Sticking to certain rules is it's good to honor these rules as well, because like I said, we don't know beforehand who has knee problems, so we always want, or back problems, etc. We don't have an x-ray machine in our eyes, So we want to be as safe as we can for our students, and that's why these rules exist. Okay. So yeah, go ahead and say, don't let your knees go over the toes. But understand where that rule comes from, and understand also that if somebody is adapted to this motion, that it's okay, they can do it. So this is understanding of structure and function of joints. And understanding the structure and function of joints helps us apply appropriate load that does not cause uneven wear and tear. All right. So we do the type of yoga, the frequency of yoga, the amount of yoga that is right for our body. Okay. Um, and again, this depends on what is your goal in your yoga practice. Is it a spiritual goal? Is it for relaxation? Or is it for muscle building, strength building, endurance training? Okay, let's take this example. Uneven wear and tear. Okay. So let's say you have a car and your okay, you know when when you get a flat tire and you replace the flat with the spare wheel at the back. So you place the spare wheel on. You're not supposed to drive for very long with that spare wheel. You're supposed to actually, the best thing to do is to buy another set of wheels, or two sets, front and back, to replace them all entirely. Go to the garage, and so not just replace the replacement wheel, but go to the garage and have all of the wheels aligned and balanced. They check the angles of the wheels, if they're all even, the weight of the wheels, etc. Why do you need to do this? Well, let's say, for example, you replace the flat tire and you just use the spare wheel, or even if it's a new wheel, okay? That wheel now has, if you don't check it, it might not have the same weight as the other wheels. When you put it on manually, it might not have the same angle. So maybe it's this way a little bit, or that way a little bit. Okay. You did it manually, so it's not perfect. So let's say it's even, if it's even like 1 millimeter off, okay? Even if it's 1 millimeter off. If you're driving from Paris to Kujur, where we are, and you drive 8 hours, okay? That, what do you think is going to happen after 8 hours of driving on really fast roads? You're going to get uneven wear on the wheels, which might end up actually damaging the other parts of the car. So think of this example in your body. Okay, I'll give you an example. So my husband, Glenn, he loves running, and he's been running from as long as I've known him. And he's been going running, since as long as he can remember. Okay, and he is now in his 50s. Then he had no problems whatsoever, except for the last few years. He's noticed his one of his knees wasn't right. So he would rest it and he'd go running again, and it would happen again. And he'd rest it, it would go away, and it would happen again. And then he went to see a physiotherapist, or I'm not sure if it was a physiotherapist or a podiatrist, but this specialist checked him, and and said to him, one of your legs is a few millimeters longer than the other one. Um, and so that's where actually then they found out that that's where the knee pain was coming from, because it was such a small difference between one leg and the other leg. It's, not much. He never noticed it, because he also has a very high tolerance for pain. He never noticed it all these years, but after a while, after many years of this, then you can start to see the uneven wear and tear. Um, so this is why in yoga practice, um, we want to train our bodies into safe practices, um, and we want to train our bodies for balance. We want to train our bodies for ease to a certain extent as well, um, so that we don't get bad habits that could catch up with us after a while, after long periods of yoga. Um, so for some people who have been practicing yoga for a long time, um, don't don't get any injuries until later on, because of wear and tear and because of certain imbalances in the body that have now caught up with them. There's a note here as well. So arthritis, which happens in old age, not for old people, but for some people, this is the wearing down of the articular cartilage. Um, we discussed this as well in the lecture Yoga for Older People. Younger people also get arthritis, especially if it's repetitive injury or repetitive use of that joint. So, for example, there is a cyclist who recently retired at the age of 38, which is really young. And it was because of arthritis. And that's really young to get arthritis. Normally, it's people who are in their maybe 70s, 60s who get arthritis, but he got it at such an early age because he was really at a very, very high level in his sport, and it was just really overtraining of the same joints. And so it was just wearing down the cartilage. Okay. So wishing that guy well. Primary goals of biomechanics in exercise. Okay, so why do we want understanding of biomechanics? For performance and for movement enhancement, that's one. And the second one is for injury prevention and for rehabilitation. So for your self-study, think about how the concepts of biomechanics, how these concepts relate to performance and movement enhancement, and also relate how these concepts relate to injury prevention and rehabilitation. Understanding structure and function of joints. So you have to have this understanding that different parts of your body move in different ways. So your shoulder joint doesn't move the same way as your spine. The spine moves differently in different places. So for a lot of people, for example, the lumbar spine, the back, and the cervical spine are the most mobile, whereas actually the thoracic spine, wherever there's a rib cage, that doesn't really move as much. So there are joints that move more, have more range of motion than other joints. And also the direction of the movement of each of these joints is different. So for example, your ball and socket joint on your shoulder and on your hip is very different from, let's say, your elbow joint, which is a hinge joint, versus the shoulder and the hip, which are ball and socket joints. What yoga poses are safe? So that's a trick question. You have to think about the yoga pose itself. What type of strength do I need? How much strength do I need in this pose? From what muscles? How much balance do I need? What type of, how much flexibility do I need in this pose? And from which joints am I asking for the movement to be created? Okay, so which joints are creating the action? And then you look at the person who is doing this pose. What are their joints like structurally, or what is their bone structure like? How much training have they had in flexibility, in endurance, and also in muscle strength? So weighing those different things will give you different answers. But the basic answer is the yoga poses that your body is adapted to, those are the safe ones. The yoga poses that your body is not adapted to, then those are the dangerous ones for you. So this is where you hear teachers say, sometimes you hear teachers say, go to where it's comfortable. You also hear teachers say, go to the edge. You know? So it's just right to the point where you're not doing too much, that you're going to the point of injury. And you also hear, don't do something that you're not ready for. So something that you're not ready for means that it's a pose that your body is not adapted to. Okay, let's talk about avoiding injury. In avoiding injury, we talk about adaptation. We've been talking about adaptation, how the body adapts for a while now. So the ability of bone to alter its morphology in response to local physical stimuli is predicted upon the appropriate recruitment of bone cell populations. So remember Wolff's law, which states that I think it's here somewhere. Let's see. Wait, Wolff's law is talking about the bones and how your bones will actually change. It will put down more layers. It's got to do with RNA and etc. etc. But basically saying your bones will adapt to the stress that you're putting on it. The correlate to this is Davis' law, which states the tendon and ligaments get stronger in response to the load force placed on them. So your bones are adapting, your tendons and ligaments are also adapting. All right. When we talk about the type of stress I am putting on the body, the type of stress I'm putting on the bone and the muscles, you want to start to think about magnitude. So how much, location, where, which joint, direction, so at what angle. This has also significance in yoga. For example, you could be on the floor and opening your legs up in Upavishta Konasana, And that will feel very different from, let's say, shoulder stand and opening your legs up in shoulder stand. Okay. In one case, you have the floor. In another case, it's just gravity. When you go into bow pose, the back bend in bow pose feels very different from the back bend in Ustrasan. But if you take a photo of those two poses, the shape of the body is actually the same. But what has changed is the angle. What has changed is your relationship to gravity. What has changed is how you are getting into the pose and which muscles you're relying on. Okay, duration. So how often are you stressing, putting stress on the muscles and the bones? Are you giving enough time for your body to recuperate? Another note here as well is as we get older, the body, the muscles and the bones recuperate slower. So you have to start to think about also more rest. Just allowing enough time for the body to rest, because it's when the body rests that the body gets stronger. It's when we rest that the body repairs itself. Duration and how often it's also referring to repetitive action. Okay, how much chaturanga am I doing? Okay, how much chaturanga is my body adapted for? If you're doing too much of this, think about how that is affecting your shoulder girdle, for example. Frequency, how fast? Am I doing a really fast yoga, a vinyasa or dynamic type of yoga that my body is not adapted to, that I am actually causing myself injury? Or am I doing yoga that is slow and mindful and very careful? That doesn't mean that all vinyasa, all dynamic yoga is dangerous. It's just what your body is adapted for. It's also what your body is trained for to a certain extent, your muscle memory. So if you're a beginner and you're still learning the difference between warrior one, warrior two, you're a beginner and you're still learning how to place your body or train your body, get enough strength to do knees, chest, and chin or chaturanga. And then you go to a class that doesn't that is really fast and dynamic, your body doesn't have enough time to adapt to the poses. But if your body has been trained for many months, many years, to the extent that the teacher doesn't even have to tell you how to do a pose, they just tell you, okay, inhale warrior one, exhale warrior two, and they're just giving you simple cues, and your muscle memory and your body already knows how to do this, then there's no problem. It becomes an enjoyable activity. Okay. To promote healthy adaptation, we want to gradually expose the joint to load. Okay, so if you are trying to lift something up, your goal is to lift this, let's say 20 kilos. Okay, my goal is to lift 20 kilos. You won't start at day one with 20 kilos. You start first with, okay, what feels easy, and then you start adding. Then your body adapts to it. Okay, muscles get stronger. Okay, that's easy. Then you add more. Okay, that's easy. And then you add more, and then you add more, and then finally you get to 20 kilos. So in yoga, if your goal is, let's say, to do a handstand or a headstand or a chaturanga really, really well, you don't start by training yourself. Okay, let's just do as many as we can of the full pose. You have to train yourself with other poses first, or other exercises that train those same muscles, or think about preparation. Okay, so slowly building up to it and gradually exposing the joint to the load, um, and also gradually building and repairing the muscles to get them stronger. The musculoskeletal system is always building, repairing, or degenerating in response to the doses of mechanical output. Okay. Um, Standard alignment versus Davis law. What is Davis law? Davis law states that tendon and ligaments get stronger in response to load that is placed on them. And this is analogous to Wolff's law, which deals with bones. Okay, so what is standard alignment? So standard alignment is saying, okay, for what you need to be is this shape, so a certain shape. Um, what Davis law is telling us is, well, you can actually go beyond that, but your body has to be adapted to it. Okay, and your body to a certain extent will adapt to it if you are training it carefully, because ligaments get stronger in response to load that is placed on them. But if you give the body too much too soon, then injuries can happen. Progressive load. So loading must progressively increase above normal loading patterns to stimulate growth. So our example of, okay, I want to lift 20 kilos. I have to start with what's easy, then I add to that. And then if that gets easy, then I add to it. That gets easy, I add to it. So I go from, let's say, 5 kilos, 7, 10, until I reach 20. So this is how you stimulate growth in the muscles and in the bones. If we want to get the bones to be stronger, we challenge ourselves slowly in the yoga practice. So maybe I am training myself in this dynamic yoga, in this Ashtanga yoga, and I only do the sun salutation A, and I get strong in that. And then the following month, the following week, I do sun salutation A, the 5 rounds, and then the B, and then slowly add on the poses. That is how it was originally taught by Pattabhi Jois in Mysore style. He would only progress you when you were ready for it, which is very much in line with the principles of biomechanics and progressive loading. That goes for endurance training as well. So let's say you want to do your 108 sun salutations. You want to train for that. You want to start, let's say, with 5. As that gets easy, you add another 2, another 5, and then slowly build up your endurance, build up your muscle memory and your muscle strength. Underloading will have the opposite effect. Tissues will adaptively diminish. So if you're just doing something that's not challenging for your body, then there's no effect. Your body is not getting stronger. So, for example, let's say I take some weights, and if my goal is to increase bicep strength and mass, but I just stick with really light weights, and I do this up and down, up and down. Okay, I'm finished. And there wasn't there wasn't any stress. The load force was not enough for the biceps to be stimulated to grow. So there has to be effort and enough that you're actually creating micro tears in the muscles too, and then when they repair, they grow stronger. So you have to have enough weight so that when you're going on your 10th repetition, you're going 10. Okay. Um, so in your yoga practice, unless your goal is to just relax, to take it easy, or you have some other goal in the yoga practice, like a spiritual goal. If your goal in yoga is to strengthen the body, then you should be always challenging yourself more and more every time. So, doing a longer practice, trying to slowly adapt to more difficult poses, holding the poses longer as well. So, not just like, okay, do this difficult pose for 1 second and then I'm finished. The magnitude of optimal load is not absolute. It is relative to the typical load patterns of the individuals. So you cannot say, okay, for everybody, this is it, we stop here. Body is really amazing. You can, there's so many factors that play into where is the absolute for a person. How does downward facing dog become a rest pose? So downward facing dog becomes a rest pose when your body is actually adapted to it. You have enough strength, you have enough flexibility and endurance that you do this pose and you're simply hanging out. Downward facing dog doesn't become a rest pose in somebody who is maybe new to yoga, has maybe lower physical fitness, and is still adapting to the pose. It's a very difficult pose for somebody like that. So you have to consider everything when it comes to thinking like a biomechanist in yoga. Okay, so for the last part of this lecture, we're going to look at just very quickly some transitional movement assessments. So remember when I said that a physiotherapist can actually help you, a physiotherapist can help you to determine which muscles in you are dominant and which muscles are weaker. So they can design assessments to go over your muscles and your movements. And these are some examples. So just to give you an overview, but really you want to do this who is somebody who is specifically trained for it. Okay, so we have 4 examples here: the overhead squat, the single leg squat, the push-up, and the star balance excursion. Okay, so I'm just going to go through it very quickly, just so you have an idea of what's happening and what to look out for. And you can also have these ideas in your head when you are teaching. So when you're teaching yoga and you see some of the errors here or some of these images in your students, then you can have an idea of which muscles are more dominant, which muscles are weaker. If you want to know that in great detail and more specifically, then you can consult with a physiotherapist. So for example, the Utkatasana, the squat, you see here these lines. This is what you're looking for, perfectly parallel lines here. And here you have this perfect cross. So this is the ideal. And also here at the front view or anterior view, you have the legs perfectly straight. Okay, so for this, if you see these positions, then we know that we've got somebody here who has very balanced muscles. But what can happen is you can see many different variations. So here you can see the feet flattening. Here you can see the feet turning out. Here you can see maybe the knees turning inwards. And here the knees turning outwards. Okay, and for each of these positions, there's different muscles that are weaker and different muscles that are stronger. Now, moving on to here, to your top right, some people, when they perform this Utkatasana or this squat, you could see that they arch the back and stick out their bum. And this could be a weakness in the core muscles. You can have somebody who's doing the opposite and curling the back, and it could be some weakness in the lower back. Weakness maybe in the upper and lower back. Someone who is really hunching forward over like this. Weakness maybe in the upper back here if they have their arms to the front rather than by their ears. And so on and so forth. So what happens is when you are with a physiotherapist, they will look at all of this. They'll ask you to do it. They'll ask you to do the movement maybe 10 times because it's when your body reaches fatigue that your body starts to overcompensate. So it's really, the first 2 times you do it, you're doing perfect form, and you see the overcompensations only after more effort. So your physiotherapist will have something like this and write down their observations. And then from this chart, they can determine which muscles are probably weaker and which muscles are probably stronger. So it's the same for single leg squat assessment. So it's basically squatting with one leg lifted. And you can see here the person doing it in perfect form. And here you can see the overcompensations, different compensations of muscles that are overcompensations of muscles that are stronger. And the muscles that are weaker are sort of giving in. Push-up assessment, that's very interesting as well because, so here you have the perfect form when the muscles are balanced, and here you have lower back sagging, so there could be weakness in the core muscles, the abdominal muscles, and you see the opposite happening here. Here you have maybe a weakness in the upper trapezius or rhomboids. They are releasing their head down. Oh, sorry. This is what I was referring to, releasing their head down. Here it's shoulders elevated. Here it's scapular winging. So again, your physiotherapist will have a chart like this and write down their observations, and from the observations note down which muscles are weaker and which ones are stronger, etc., etc. So the last one in this example is the star balance excursion. So you're doing these basically one-legged squats in different planes and in different directions. Okay. So that's it. I think we'll end here. It's just a short introduction on biomechanics and yoga. And I hope that there was something here that was helpful for you. So until next time, see you and goodbye. Namaste.